Black waiter helps drunk billionaire get home and ends up owning a high-end Japanese restaurant. The woman slid off the bar stool like a puppet without strings, her $3,000 Italian dress now drenched in top-shelf sake and regret. It was 2:30 in the morning at the Sakura Palace, and Malik Carter knew his shift should have ended an hour ago, but there he was, watching one of Manhattan's richest customers stagger dangerously close to the marble stairs. "Ma'am, let me help you," Malik said, approaching her carefully. At 26, he had learned that drunk, rich women could be unpredictable, especially when a black man offered to help. 3 years working at this place had taught him that kindness was sometimes interpreted as opportunism. "No, I don't need charity," she muttered, trying to steady herself against the authentic Japanese cherrywood wall. Her platinum blonde hair was messy, her makeup smudged, but even so, it was impossible not to recognize Ava Lancaster, heiress to the hotel empire that dominated the East Coast. Malik hesitated. Over the past few months, he had noticed something strange in the behavior of some employees when Ava appeared. Whispering stopped, nervous glances, conversations that ended abruptly, especially from manager Callahan and his friends from the corporate office. "Look, I'll just call you a taxi, okay? It's not safe to go out alone like this." Ava tried to focus her gaze on him, blinking several times. You're not like the others," she said, leaning heavily on his arm. "Why are you being nice to me? Everyone else just wants something." The question took Malik by surprise. In fact, he wasn't sure. Maybe it was because he had grown up watching his mother work 16 hours a day as a cleaning lady to support 3 children and understood what it meant to be alone and vulnerable. Or maybe it was because, in recent months, he had realized that not everything at Sakura Palace was what it seemed. As they waited for the Uber on the quiet sidewalk, Ava muttered something about genuine people and second chances. Malik thought it was just the alcohol talking, but he mentally noted the address she was giving him, a penthouse on the Upper East Side worth more than his entire life. What he didn't realize was that the restaurant's security camera was recording every second of their interaction. The next day, Malik arrived at work expecting another routine shift at Sakura Palace. What he didn't know was that his kindness from the night before had been observed by someone much more sober than Ava appeared to be. And that same kindness would be used against him in a way he could never have imagined. Executive Chef Kenji Nakamura greeted him with a strange look. "Malik, I need to talk to you in my office." Now the tone was different, laden with a tension that Malik had rarely heard before. Malik's heart raced. In 3 years working there, he had learned that calls to the office rarely ended well for employees like him, especially when the regional manager, Richard Callahan, was leaning on the desk with that smile that promised trouble. Callahan was the kind of man who used racism as a subtle tool, always careful never to say anything explicit, but making his intentions crystal clear through professional concerns and establishment standards. Malik had learned to read these codes very early in life. "Sit down," Callahan said, leafing through a folder with deliberately slow movements. "I've received some complaints about your behavior with customers. It seems you've been crossing some lines." Malik frowned. "What kind of lines?" "Harassing intoxicated clients, offering unsolicited services outside of working hours." Callahan paused dramatically, savoring each word. "Some would say you're trying to take advantage of vulnerable situations, especially with clients of Mrs. Lancaster's caliber." The accusation hit Malik like a punch in the stomach. He knew exactly which night Callahan was talking about, but the distorted version of the story left him speechless. It was like watching his own decency being twisted into something dirty and predatory. "I just helped a client get home safely," Malik said, keeping his voice steady despite his rising anger. "Anyone would have done the same thing." Callahan smiled coldly, opening his briefcase to reveal printed photos from security cameras. "Of course that's what happened. The problem is, we can't have employees like you leaving room for this kind of misunderstanding. Our clientele has certain expectations about discretion and appropriate boundaries." The heavy silence that followed said it all. Malik realized that no matter how many compliments he received from clients or how impeccable his work record was, to Callahan, he would always be just another problem waiting to happen. Just another black man who had forgotten his place. "So what are you saying?" Malik asked, even though he already knew the answer. "I'm saying that maybe you should consider other career opportunities, places more suited to your profile." But what neither of them could have imagined was that, at that very moment across town, Ava Lancaster was having a very different conversation with her lawyers. A conversation that would not only change Malik's life, but reveal dark secrets about Sakura Palace that had been carefully hidden for years. In fact, Ava was much more sober that night than anyone suspected. And what she had discovered about Callahan and his hiring practices was about to explode in a way that no one at Sakura Palace would ever forget. If you've ever felt judged before you even opened your mouth, then you know that sometimes justice needs a little divine assistance. Subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of kindness turned into the most epic turnaround an elite restaurant has ever seen. The resignation came the following Friday, wrapped in corporate language and delivered by a nervous intern who could barely look Malik in the eye. Operating cost cuts was the official justification, but everyone knew the truth. Callahan had gotten what he wanted. Malik carefully folded the uniform he had worn for 3 years and placed it in the closet for the last time. His colleagues watched in awkward silence, some with genuine pity, others with the cowardly relief that they weren't the chosen one. Kenji approached discreetly and slipped an envelope into his hand. "Your tips from the last 6 months," the Japanese chef whispered. "I kept them all separate. They're rightfully yours." Walking home in the drizzling October rain, Malik called his mother. Lucia Carter was in the middle of her night shift cleaning an office building on Wall Street, but she always answered when he called. "Mom, I lost my job," he said bluntly. Lucia had taught her children that bad news didn't get any better with sugar. "Why? Did you do something wrong?" Number I did something right. There was a pause. Lucia knew her son well enough to understand that there was a bigger story behind those words. "Come home. Let's talk about this." The two-bedroom apartment in Queens, where Malik had grown up, smelled of the same mixture of detergent and strong coffee as always. Lucia arrived at 6 in the morning, still in her cleaning uniform, and found her son at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. "What's all this?" she asked, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "I'm trying to understand something that happened at work," Malik replied, showing her the notes he had made. "Remember when you told me about that supervisor at Goldman Sachs, who always made excuses to transfer you to the toughest floors?" Lucia nodded bitterly. "Thompson, 20 years cleaning offices, and I never had a problem with anyone. But with him, it was always something. The only difference was that I didn't bow down to him like he wanted me to." That's exactly it. Callahan did the same thing to me, only in a more sophisticated way. Malik explained about Ava, about the fabricated accusations, about the pattern he had begun to notice in recent months. Black and Latino employees were being reassigned or fired for minor infractions that white employees committed without consequences. "Son," Lucia said, resting her hand on his, "sometimes life puts us in a position where we have to choose between accepting injustice or fighting against it. You know which choice I've always made." Malik smiled for the first time in days. Lucia Carter had raised 3 children on her own after her husband died in a work accident. She had faced racist supervisors, condescending rich ladies, and a system that constantly tried to remind her of her place. And never, not once, had she bowed her head. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to pretend nothing happened." On Monday, Malik returned to Sakura Palace as a customer. He asked for a table in the corner and observed the dynamics he had never fully noticed when he was on the other side. Callahan circled the main room like a king inspecting his kingdom, stopping for whispered conversations with important white customers and completely ignoring the tables occupied by people of color. That's when he saw something interesting. Ava Lancaster entered alone and asked for a discreet table at the bar. Callahan practically ran to greet her, all smiles and bows. But Ava dismissed him quickly, preferring to sit in silence watching the restaurant's movement. Malik realized she was doing the same thing he was, observing, taking notes, paying attention to details that most people ignored. When their eyes met briefly, she gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. That night, Malik received a message from an unknown number. Coffee tomorrow at 9. Corner Deli on 72 and Columbus. We have a lot to talk about. He stayed up late thinking. 3 years working in that place had taught him that people like Ava Lancaster didn't send messages to people like him without a very specific reason. And considering that Callahan had used her name to justify his dismissal, Malik suspected that this reason would be very interesting. In his desk drawer, he kept a small notebook where he had written down all the inconsistencies he had noticed at Sakura Palace over the months. Dates, times, strange conversations, customers who received special treatment for no apparent reason. He had never known exactly why he kept this information, but something instinctive told him that one day it would be important. Now looking at the pages filled with his careful handwriting, Malik began to understand that perhaps it was no coincidence that Callahan was in such a hurry to get rid of him. People who pay attention to details can become inconvenient when there are secrets to hide. Each new humiliation had only strengthened something inside him that Callahan couldn't see, a silent determination that grew precisely under pressure, like a diamond being formed underground. What that privileged man didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing his own sentence, and that Malik Carter was not the kind of person who forgot or forgave injustices. For a moment, when he had bowed his head before the veiled insults in the office, Callahan thought he had broken his spirit. But those who know true strength know that it grows precisely in silence, fed by the righteous anger of those who know they deserve much more than they have been offered. The corner deli on 72 was exactly the kind of place where millionaires rarely appeared. Worn Formica tables, coffee served in thick mugs, and the permanent smell of fried bacon in the air. Malik arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table in the back, still not completely believing that Ava Lancaster had asked to meet him. She showed up promptly at 9, wearing jeans and a simple blouse that probably cost more than Malik's monthly salary at Sakura Palace. Without the elaborate makeup and impeccable hair from the night at the restaurant, she looked surprisingly ordinary until she opened her mouth. "You were fired because of me," she said without preamble, sitting down across from him. "Callahan said I filed a harassment complaint." Malik nodded. "That's what he told me." "That's a lie." Ava pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. "That's the only conversation I've had with Sakura Palace since that night. An email thanking me for my exceptional assistance and asking me to congratulate the employee responsible." Malik read the message twice. The date, the time, everything matched. Callahan had made up the complaint completely. "Why are you showing me this?" Ava smiled, but there was no humor in that smile. "Because my company has a significant stake in the group financing the expansion of Sakura Palace. And because over the past 6 months, I've been investigating a very interesting pattern of racial discrimination in the hiring and firing of employees." Malik felt something shift in his chest. "You knew I was going to be fired?" "I suspected it. Callahan has a problematic history. 3 black employees fired in the last year, all for minor infractions that white employees commit without consequence. A Latino waiter transferred to the kitchen after receiving many compliments from customers. You were next on the list." She opened a folder and slid documents across the table. Employment contracts, performance reviews, customer complaint records. Malik recognized some names. Colleagues who had simply disappeared from the restaurant without clear explanation. Callahan is systematically building a team of white front-of-house employees. He keeps a few Latinos in the kitchen, so it doesn't look too obvious, but anyone black in a visible position is gradually weeded out. Malik studied the papers. "How did you get all this?" "I'm an investor. I have access to human resources reports." Ava paused. And I have other personal reasons for wanting to see Callahan face consequences. Over the next hour, Ava told her own story, how Callahan had systematically rejected her suggestions for diversity programs at the restaurant, how he talked condescendingly about appropriate clientele and establishment standards whenever she mentioned inclusion, how she had discovered that he was using his position to filter not only employees but also customers who didn't fit his vision of excellence. That night you helped me, Ava continued. I wasn't really drunk. I was testing how the staff would react to a vulnerable customer. Callahan saw me coming and just disappeared into his office. You were the only one who offered to help. Malik leaned back in his chair, processing. So it was all staged? The situation, yes. Your response number. You genuinely cared about a stranger in distress, and that told me everything I needed to know about your character. Ava opened her laptop and showed him a detailed presentation, hiring charts by ethnicity, retention statistics, promotion patterns. The case against Callahan was built with mathematical precision. I'm putting together a lawsuit for systematic discrimination. I need employees willing to testify. Malik looked at the data, then at Ava. And you think I'm going to get other employees to take that risk? Most of them have families to support. That's why I need you as coordinator. You know the people. You know who you can trust. Ava closed her laptop. And there's something else. I'm offering you the opportunity to take over the management of a new Japanese restaurant my company is opening in Harlem. Shared ownership, profits split with the employees, clear diversity policies. Malik was silent for a long moment. It was too tempting to be true, but at the same time it made cruel sense. Ava Lancaster didn't do charity, she did smart business. What's the real reason? He finally asked. Ava smiled, this time with genuine admiration. Callahan underestimated me because I'm a woman and young. He's underestimating you because you're black and a mere waiter. People like him repeat the same mistakes of pride over and over again. Malik thought of his mother, the bills piling up, the years he had spent swallowing small and large humiliations at Sakura Palace. He thought of the colleagues who had disappeared quietly, the veiled jokes, the condescending looks. If I do this, Malik said slowly, it won't just be about getting a better job. It will be about making sure Callahan faces the full consequences of what he did. Ava held out her hand. That's exactly why I chose you. That afternoon, Malik called 3 former colleagues at Sakura Palace. 2 agreed to meet to talk. The third, Caleb, still worked there as a kitchen assistant and was willing to secretly document the discriminatory practices that continued to take place. Over the next 2 weeks, Malik transformed into something Callahan would never have expected, a meticulous and strategic organizer. He collected statements, recorded authorized phone conversations, and photographed documents that Caleb was able to access discreetly. Each new piece of evidence revealed the systematic extent of the discrimination. Callahan wasn't just a casual racist. He was a deliberate architect of exclusion, using his power to mold Sakura Palace in his own image of superiority. Meanwhile, Callahan went about his normal routine, completely unaware that every condescending word, every discriminatory decision was being carefully documented. The arrogance that made him feel untouchable had become his greatest vulnerability. For a moment, when Callahan smiled with satisfaction at seeing yet another Latino employee being reassigned to less visible duties, he thought he had perfectly shaped his little kingdom of privilege. But those who know the true power of justice know that it grows precisely in silence, fed by the patience of those who know that the sweetest revenge is the one the enemy never sees coming. The meeting was scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. at the Sakura Palace corporate office. Callahan arrived confident, believing it would be another routine discussion about operational efficiency with investors. What he didn't know was that Malik was sitting in a conference room upstairs, watching everything through a live video conference. Ava entered the room accompanied by 2 lawyers and a representative from the corporate ethics board. Callahan greeted everyone with his usual fake smile, adjusting his expensive tie as if he were about to receive an award. Mr. Callahan, Ava began, opening a thick folder. I need to discuss with you some hiring and firing standards that have come to our attention. Callahan chuckled. Sure, we're always open to optimization. I hope you've noticed how I've managed to maintain the restaurant's standards of excellence by eliminating problematic elements. The first lawyer turned on a projector. A detailed chart appeared on the screen, showing the layoffs over the past 18 months. 100% of black front-of-house employees had been laid off. 80% of Latino employees had been reassigned to less visible positions. 0 white employees had been fired for similar infractions. Callahan's smile faltered slightly. Those numbers? Well, statistical coincidences happen. Coincidences. Ava pressed the remote control. The next screen showed transcripts of recorded conversations. Callahan talking about appropriate clientele and establishment standards. Callahan instructing supervisors to find infractions in specific employees. Callahan bragging about cleaning house. The color drained from Callahan's face. How did you get this? These recordings are illegal. Actually, the second lawyer replied calmly, all of them were made with the consent of at least one of the parties involved. Completely legal. Ava continued clicking. Internal emails, photos of human resources documents, signed statements from former employees. And then the final bombshell, a video of Callahan in his office alone, celebrating Malik's dismissal with a champagne toast and the words, "One more problem solved." Who recorded this? Callahan stammered, his hands shaking visibly. Someone you completely underestimated, Ava replied. Someone who worked at this restaurant for 3 years watching, taking notes, documenting every one of your discriminatory decisions. The door to the room opened and Malik entered, carrying a box of files. Callahan stared at him as if he were seeing a ghost. You, Callahan whispered. Impossible. You're just a black waiter you thought would be easy to get rid of? Malik interrupted, placing the box on the table. You're right. I was just that. Until you taught me that people like me need to be much smarter than people like you to survive. Malik opened the box, revealing months of meticulous documentation. Every conversation recorded, every email copied, every witness willing to confirm your practices. You've built such a clear pattern of discrimination that even a blind jury could see it. Callahan stood up abruptly, trying to regain some control. This is a setup. You can't prove anything. I know important people. I have connections. Ava smiled coldly. You had connections, past tense, because she glanced at her watch. Approximately 15 minutes, this meeting will be broadcast live to the local press. In 30 minutes, every current employee of Sakura Palace will receive copies of all of this documentation. And in 1 hour, the corporate board will vote to fire you for cause. Callahan's face was now completely red, sweat pouring down his forehead. You can't do this to me. I built this place. I maintain the standards. The standards you maintained, Malik said, his voice calm but firm, were standards of hatred, exclusion, and abuse of power. You built nothing. You only destroyed people who were better than you in every way. Ava stood up. Mr. Callahan, you are fired for systematic discrimination, creation of a hostile work environment, and violation of corporate diversity and inclusion policies. Your benefits are terminated. Your references will be accompanied by a full report on your practices, and legal action will be taken against you personally. Callahan staggered, leaning on the desk. You've ruined my life. 20 years of my career. No, Malik replied, looking directly into the eyes of the man who had tried to humiliate him. You ruined your own life the moment you decided that the color of your skin gave you the right to destroy the dignity of other people. I merely documented the choices you made. As Callahan was escorted out of the building by security guards, Malik remained in the room watching through the window. Ava approached him. How do you feel? She asked. Malik took a deep breath. I don't feel vindicated. I feel free. Like I can finally breathe without fear of being judged for existing. Outside, Callahan desperately tried to call his contacts, discovering that news of his dismissal had already spread throughout the industry. His reputation, built on a rotten foundation of prejudice and privilege, was crumbling in real time. Ava looked at Malik with genuine admiration. You know you could have chosen to just take the job I offered you and leave all this behind. Malik smiled for the first time in weeks. My mother always taught me that when you have the power to make a difference, not doing so is also a choice. I chose to make a difference. As Callahan left Sakura Palace for the last time, carrying his belongings in a cardboard box, one question hung in the air. Was it possible that a man who had spent decades feeding his sense of superiority through the humiliation of others could truly understand the extent of the damage he had caused? Or are some privileges so deeply ingrained that even the most complete defeat cannot eradicate them? 6 months later, Malik stood in the middle of what was once an abandoned warehouse in Harlem, watching a team of designers transform the space into something Callahan could never have imagined. Kibo, the Japanese word for hope, would not just be a Japanese restaurant. It would be a statement. Ava had fulfilled her promise even more generously than she had promised. Malik wasn't just the manager, he was a co-owner with 30% of the stock and complete autonomy to hire and train the staff. More importantly, every employee would receive a share of the profits, something revolutionary in the restaurant industry. How many former Sakura Palace employees did you hire? Ava asked, reviewing the list of hires. Everyone who wanted to come, Malik replied with a smile, and some that Callahan fired years ago. Natalie is going to be our head sommelier. Caleb took over the kitchen, and Kenji agreed to be our cultural consultant. The irony was delicious. Callahan had spent years boasting about maintaining standards by eliminating talented employees because of the color of their skin. Now those same employees were creating something that would make Sakura Palace seem old-fashioned and irrelevant. Malik's phone rang. It was his mother calling from work. Son, I just saw a story about you in the paper. Are you sure it's not a dream? Malik laughed. The article had come out that morning. Former waiter who faced discrimination opens revolutionary restaurant in Harlem. The photo showed Malik with his diverse staff, all smiling genuinely. The exact opposite of the tense, hierarchical atmosphere Callahan had cultivated. It's real, Mom. And there's more. Remember that conversation we had about dignity in the workplace? Now I'm creating jobs where people are respected from day one. Meanwhile, across town, Callahan faced a very different reality. The lawsuit filed by Malik and the other employees had turned into a federal case alleging systematic discrimination. His important connections had evaporated overnight. The man who once felt untouchable now couldn't get an interview for basic management positions. On Kibo's opening day, Malik looked around the crowded dining room and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine pride. Not the empty pride of humiliating others, as Callahan did, but the pride of building something greater than himself. Kibo was an immediate success. Reservations were booked solid for 2 months, and food critics praised not only the exceptional food, but the welcoming and respectful atmosphere Malik had created. Employees smiled genuinely, and customers felt welcome regardless of their appearance or background. Caleb, now executive chef, approached Malik during the evening rush. Chef, table 12 wants to thank you personally. They said they've never been treated so well in a restaurant. Malik walked over to the table, where an elderly couple awaited him with warm smiles. We wanted to thank you personally, said the lady. It's been so long since we felt truly welcome in a place like this. It was moments like these that reminded Malik why he had fought so hard, not for revenge, but to create spaces where no one would ever have to feel the way he had felt at Sakura Palace. A year after his resignation, Malik was sitting in his office at Kibo, reviewing proposals to open a second location in Brooklyn. His mother had retired. Malik insisted on covering her expenses so she could finally rest. The restaurant staff had become a genuine family. Callahan? The last Malik heard, he was working as an assistant manager at a fast food chain in the suburbs. Ironic how the man who despised people like Malik now depended on the generosity of employers willing to give second chances. Malik looked out the office window, watching the movement of Harlem outside. People of all colors and backgrounds passed by on the sidewalk, many stopping to read Kibo's menu with curiosity and interest. It was exactly the community Callahan had tried to exclude, and now they were the foundation of Malik's success. The best revenge hadn't been destroying Callahan. It had been building something so good that it made everything he stood for irrelevant. While Callahan languished in bitterness and irrelevance, Malik grew by creating opportunities and changing lives. Callahan tried to diminish Malik because of the color of his skin, but he ended up revealing his own insignificance. Malik learned that true victory isn't about bringing down those who hurt you, it's about achieving a greatness they could never imagine. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were superior, you know that success is the most eloquent response there is. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes being rejected by the wrong people is the first step to finding where you truly belong.